Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
It
Mark.
is the post pod for the Better Briefs and the Better Ideas project.
That's right.
It's going to be great.
gonna
I've
be
already got better ideas. I'm already
You're
feeling
wearing
like
a
I'm
jacket,
briefed.
man.
Yeah, that was a really good idea this morning.
You look smart. You look smart.
Well, that's the jacket for you then.
That's okay. You do what you do. And I felt so intimidated, everyone, when I joined the stream originally. I saw Mark all suited up, got collars and everything. I had to
Collars, buttons.
so I'm like, I just threw on a jacket just to kind of like help with it. So those that are just listening, head over to YouTube page to check out like our what is it? Our fit check. Is that a thing the kids say?
Yeah, I don't
Fit
know.
check, maybe.
Oh, that's I like it.
Anyways,
Gotta get a clothing sponsor.
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Matt and Pieter-Paul.
What a great conversation, eh?
Yeah. I know you. Why don't you go first? There's a few things that we were just chatting about.
Yeah, so I think like going through back our shared notes and whatnot, and of course, like I think it's easiest for me to compartmentalize. Okay, what are the three or four themes? And so like there were the three themes that I think we agreed on. The first was the importance of the brief. The second was creative effectiveness and the business impact that it has. Third was the collaboration and process. So those were the three for me key takeaways. So I felt like, why don't we just start talking about it? Let's kick off with the first one. It's like the importance of the brief.
Yeah. There was it was almost a punchline that we talked about where I think it was something like 90% of marketers think they're awesome at writing the briefs and about 10% of their agencies agree. It shows there's just a big gap, between, and we've all a lot of us have been in both positions of being the brief writer and also the brief acceptor. It's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do well. And you can see why there's so many competing interests within the organization, so many things changing, so many voices to sort of incorporate into a brief from inside the organization, a lot of stakeholder opinions. And so it's no wonder that the agency side looks at this and goes, what? What are you trying to do here?
Yeah.
So I appreciate the challenge of it to begin with.
Yeah. There was one thing, I don't remember if it was Matt or Pieter-Paul that said this, but a brief that isn't treated like a contract is designed to fail.
Yeah.
And I think like when you start thinking about it in that context, you start really appreciating the rigor that needs to go into this document. And I think you and I have talked about this time and time again, about it being one of the most important artifacts that we have. But I don't think many of us think about it as a term of like almost like a contract that you're creating with your creative agency, your media agency, whatever the case may be, right?
Totally.
And I think we shouldn't be overlooking the importance of that.
Well, totally. And then, and we'll talk about this again later, but when it comes to the better ideas part of their two reports, I mean, looking back at the brief as a form of an evaluation tool to see how well the creative idea executes against the strategic brief. I think you're 100% right. Like when you think about that as a contract, it changes a little bit because whenever we have a contract, it's almost like a scope of work. You go, okay, well,
totally.
Here's the things that I said I was going to do. Here's the things that you said you would deliver on. And did you do that? And so without the idea of the brief being a contract, it kind of loses its or misses the opportunity to create more value.
I completely agree. Before we move to creative effectiveness and business impact, the one last thing for me on the importance of the brief is a poor brief can also lead to that significant financial and human cost as well. Like, repeat executions or iterations, sometimes more than you should be doing. That's usually rooted into likely a poor brief, or internally, if those of us on the client side, poor alignment across our internal stakeholders.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. What do you think about the rework component? I mean, I think he said at one point there was 3 steps in the approval process. And now there's 5, and I think the extra parts were, if I'm just going from memory, but I think the extra parts were largely due to rework.
Yeah. It honestly, I think it just comes back to, and listen, it's to no fault of any advertiser out there. We know that something like marketing sometimes can be very difficult to get full approval on across all stakeholders at a moment, or even like the approach. Like it's one of the hardest things to do when we're meant to move with speed and be somewhat agile and whatnot. Sometimes the organization itself doesn't allow us to do that at the speed that we may want to operate in. So the fact that it's gone from 3 to 5 does not surprise me from an internal approver process. I think from our perspective is we have to kind of make sure that we're bringing them along throughout the process to make sure when it is time to sign off that it's not the first time they're seeing it, right? They've seen some of the iterations, and I know we always want to be really polished when we're presenting, but sometimes showcasing or kind of pulling back that curtain on the iterative work may help reduce that barrier as well. Do you have thoughts on that, on what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, there's that part where they talked about how to give feedback on ideas and sort of a creative, I don't want to call it a template, but I keep thinking about, we had Karen on talking about Rethink's model of this. And so they use crafts as a way to evaluate creative ideas. I know Dan White's published something that's really, I've used it in the past. It's super helpful. Yeah. But it's having some form of structure in the kind of feedback you want to let people know feedback is great. Here's how we would like it, because this is the most productive way for us to use feedback as opposed to I don't like it. Pieter-Paul had a great line about, imagine going to your barber and saying, just keep cutting and I'll know it when I see it.
I love that line. I love it. I see it.
But I think that is so important, like to have that. I mean, for lack of a better word, the structure of the feedback, because to get a really good idea, it does need to go through iteration, and it gets better. It can get better if there's productive feedback, but it can also quickly get worse and boring and dull and all those kinds of things if you're just constantly trying to shape this idea around, I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah. That was such a great line.
Yeah.
Okay. Shifting gears, creative effectiveness and business impact. I isolated 3 counterpoints there, or not really counterpoints, but 3 things. The first one for me was we need to understand how marketing can make money for organizations. You know, creative and effectiveness as a principle. I think we've talked about it with a few different guests over the course of 4 years. But we need to start rerouting or kind of being really thoughtful in that process when it comes to creative execution. And I know we're getting pushed by publishers alike. That's just like volume versus quality. And I feel like that's where we as advertisers would be like, wait a second. No, we have to start putting the quality in first and then create volume as an as an extension of that, not the other way around.
Yeah. This it's funny enough. The reason I'm dressed up, I'm giving a keynote today. And so one of part of the topic is business is the new stupid, which is an idea I totally blatantly stole from our friends at Capero.
Good people.
Yeah, we should get them back on soon.
Yeah, we should.
Anyway, the idea there that they had was like, there's so many more media channels, and that they're all pushing us towards, more and more personalization, which, and you and I both know, I mean, there are so many different formats of ads. Yeah. You can make yourself crazy and super busy.
Yes.
Just producing versions of an asset.
Yeah.
And then if you just take a step back and you think of like, what are we actually doing? Yeah. Those costs, the cost to all those versioning and formats and stuff isn't free unless you're using AI generated stuff and maybe all that kind of stuff. But you kind of lose sight of what the objective is, I think, in a lot of cases. And so the creative effectiveness component, there's a great example that I also stole from James Herman. If you remember the Volvo's epic splits with Van Damme.
Yes.
Has like a single idea and a really well executed campaign without 800 different versions, and had massive impact on Volvo B2B truck sales. Yeah. Because people paid attention, and all kinds of people paid attention, including all of the buyers in the buying committee. And like, I think, that's something we can get caught up in, is the trees and not the forest.
100%.
That idea of mass personalization, we can measure everything. We can go down to the single individual click that drives this transaction, and it rarely actually is that way. So I think when we step back and think about creative ideas, there's this whole notion of optimizing for the whole that is sometimes lost. That is also really important to include in the creative brief, so you don't get caught up in the, well, what's the metric that we're going to optimize this campaign for on this channel, and what about this channel, and what about this channel?
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think when it comes down to it is understand where consumers expect personalization.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't expect it on their connected TV or their TV. That's not where you expect it. But if you're, an SMS, better be personalized. My phone number. Email, better be personalized. You have my email. I've given you access to that information, in both instances. So I think understanding where personalization consumers expect to see it versus just being forced because MarTech vendors, tech vendors are telling you that, 45%. Okay, I'm sorry. This is going to be a wrong stat because I don't remember. But I remember seeing stats to the effect of X amount of percentage people would prefer to click on an ad if it was personalized, right? I don't know what that X was, but that for me is a little bit like in the open web. Don't really expect that, nor do I want to see it because that becomes creepy.
Yeah, that also. I mean, there's a whole can of worms that we should actually talk about this at some point. But
we probably should.
The targeting component, like it. It makes you believe that you can target everybody the way that you just described it, which is how you get to the personalization process, which is how I think, you think back a few steps, and then which is why you want to create 800 versions of a piece of creative. In reality is I really don't know. I'm not confident. Let's put it that way. I'm not confident in our ability to target the people that we think we're targeting.
Oh, I'm with you, man.
In any meaningful way. Like there's some things that we can do, like contextual targeting, as it turns out, is actually superior in a lot of ways than persona-based targeting. And there's published reports around that. And when you hear about things like that, you're like, well, why is that? Like if the tech was really good, it should know everything.
Yeah, but it isn't.
But it's now saying, well, if you show your ad in the sports page, the equivalent of a sports page, then you're probably going to get sports-minded people.
Totally.
So what are we doing again? Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. All right, last one, collaboration and process. I think for me, this one here was just how do you make sure you limit the amount of rework due to that misalignment, which can stifle not only creativity, it can all of a sudden become a project that everyone's excited about. All of a sudden be like, oh, we're still talking about this? Why is this still a thing? Someone just kill it already. And we've all seen those projects, right?
Totally. Well, we've all been in those projects too, I think, where we're just exhausted.
Yeah.
And just feeling demoralized and all those things because, it's almost a form of learned helplessness. Like the idea that, well, I'll put forward a good idea, but everyone's going to whittle it down anyway.
That's right.
Why bother?
Why even bother?
Yeah. And so to have people excited, to have people passionate, to get the most out of them, I think often like you want to try and keep people in a state of like a flow state,
100%
as much as you can. And so the more you push people away from that, the more apathetic they become, the less you actually get from them in terms of an outcome or an output.
Totally. And again, collaboration between teams, that's internal stakeholders, your agencies, can enhance the quality of work, but don't drag it on to the point where it now becomes a chore.
Yeah.
You don't have an infinite amount of time from the moment a brief is kicked off in a traditional context of like a campaign. I'm not talking about some longer leading strategies and things to that effect, but you don't have a lot of time where you can capitalize on that enthusiasm on this, this new project, this new thing of going to market with, or whatever it may be. And we want to make sure that you're bringing everybody along. You're bringing the best out of every single one to ensure that the output is going to be something that everyone's really proud of.
For sure.
Because if you're really proud of the media side, I'm really proud of the creative side, all of a sudden it creates this incredible environment that everyone wants to be a part of, and to celebrate it.
Totally. Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, I'm with you. That was such an interesting conversation. And so for the, as we talked about before, for the importance of a brief and the briefing process and the value you can get, an organization can get out of having a really good idea. It's amazing that it hasn't been something that has been talked about more since these guys, I feel like, since these guys started the projects that they've been working on, the research they've been working on. I don't remember anybody really talking about it that much, but it's almost like that pivot point of where strategy meets like execution, where the rubber meets the road, or whatever phrase you want to use.
Yeah.
But the brief is like the hinge point that converts all this inertia into action. And it's so important to get it right.
I completely agree.
Well, now that we look so good and that we both agree, V.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's all we got for today.
Profitability's beaming through my window right now.
The window, yeah. It is. You really look illuminated in profit. Showering in profitability there.
Oh my goodness. This is great.
Yeah.
Pieter-Paul, Matt, thank you once again for engaging us with your insights. Really appreciated you coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll, I'm sure, talk to you again at some point.
Probably.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Have a great morning.
You too.
Ciao.